Welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon Framework, Axon Server, and their ecosystem. I am your host and the producer of this podcast, Sara. In this episode, I spoke with my guest, Emilien Pecoul, a software developer, architect, and entrepreneur, about the benefits of using patterns such as domain-driven design, event sourcing, and CQRS in startup companies, as well as for freelancers looking for their next project. We talked about, of course, the benefits, but also when you should be using these patterns and when you can just eliminate using these patterns. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and let's have a listen. Hi, Emilien. Thank you so much for joining me today. Could you please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell everybody where you are and a little bit about your background?
Of course. Thank you, Sara. Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you to discuss about software development and CQRS and the startup world as well. And also a bit of freelancing because before all, I'm a freelancer, a software developer. I start my company in 2013. And I start as a freelancer because it was hard for me to find a company where I feel I can work the way I want to work in terms of good practices and stuff like that, and also in terms of how I'd like to progress as a software developer, the patterns I'd like to learn, because I was reading a lot of books and I was thinking that some patterns are better than others to build robust software. And so I start as a freelancer mainly because I wanted to take my learning as a main opportunity for me. I really need I really need to learn the thing I like to learn, and that's the basic reason why I start as a freelancer. And then in 2013, we weren't so many as freelancers, actually, not as many as now, at least. And so very quickly, we have a lot of questions about how do you do that? How do you find your customer? How do you find your projects? How do you learn? And so basically starting with meetups and conferences, we meet a lot of software developers. I say we because we were already in touch with my current associates, Clément and Florent, because I meet them in 2011. And actually, Florent was already in freelance, and it was him who convinced us to start as a freelancer as well. And
So in a sense, you kind of became, sorry to interrupt, in a sense, you became also a mentor for other developers who wanted to try this out. Yeah, that's really great.
And that's why actually we build an association called the Actual Job to help other software developers to become a freelancer in our city of Lyon, because I am from Lyon in France, as you could expect from my accent. And so after that, of course, we were happy because we help many developers to become freelancers, and none of them have regret about that. And actually, you talk with one of our job hacker, which is Sylvain Couder. He has the chance
I know,
to come on this podcast as well. So he was one of the people we helped to start as a freelancer. And yeah, it was very great. But after that, we think that we could do even better. We can have an even greater impact. And so we focus on what were the pains that we meet as a freelancers, and what are the pains that people that we have mentored have meet as well. And of course, because we were in France, it was the administrative burden, which was the most problematic part of our business.
Because I think anywhere you are, it's hard to manage everything administrative on your own as well. Yeah, of course.
That's right. That's fair. And because as a software developer, we have this chance that it's not a problem to find a mission. It's pretty easy to find a gig and to earn money, but it could be harder to do what you want, and it's really
Yeah.
easy to find to meet some traps in your career, and so we try to remove them. So we decided to build a company which is called Super Indep in 2018. It started, and the goal of this company is to remove the administrative burden for all freelancers. But after a while, we of course understand that it was a bit too big as an
Right.
objective, even if
Yeah.
it was good to start with. And that's why after that, we focus on a specific status in France, which is the status of auto-entrepreneur, but it actually represents more of half of the freelancer in France. It's a really important status
Yeah.
where people have lots of traps, and so we focus on this status mainly to remove administrative burden for auto-entrepreneur.
So what does that mean? Does that mean just the people who want to be entrepreneurs and basically start their own mission and company, basically not just working for other clients, so to speak? Is that what it
Uh,
is?
Exactly. They start their
Mm.
own business to work for other customers, and it's a very broad type of job you can do with this status. So you can sell stuff online, you can do software development, you can do anything.
Sure. So it's basically starting a company and then taking on what you want to, what you choose to do, basically, which is nice. And of course, the I worked as a contractor, and I also had my own company at a couple of different points. So it's really challenging to do all of not the ad just the and when we say administrative, I think it's a really broad sense of things, right? Because there's a lot involved. There's not just finding clients and how to communicate and how to document those hours and conversations, but it's also in some ways taking care of the finances and taxes and all of that. So it's a really broad sense, which is um, yeah, it can be really overwhelming, especially when you first start. Yeah.
Exactly, especially when you first start, as you said, and almost all the auto-entrepreneurs are actually first entrepreneur because they didn't own a company before, so they
Mhm.
have to learn a lot, and
Yeah.
we are here to help them with that, and especially with the taxes and the French taxes.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing. Really great. So, you touched on a couple of things when you were talking about your background, which I'd like to go back and dive a little bit deeper into. So, first of all, that's amazing that when you started your career, you started as a freelancer to give yourself the opportunity to learn and grow, really, and be choosy about what you want to do. I think that's a really great position to be in when you first start because you want to grow in your career and also personally and do the things that really uh, bring you energy and bring you satisfaction and fulfillment. So that's really fantastic. Now, when you say the things that you liked to do and the patterns that were effective, can you elaborate a little bit on that and tell me what were those patterns and why did you think those patterns were in a sense better than some of the other ones that you had seen before?
Yeah, of course. So as most of software developers, I learn uh, with pain what bad software is.
Right.
And when you try to work too fast and without good practices, and the result is very not interesting. It's very I mean, it's really hard as a person because you work a lot, and
Yeah.
it's almost as if the more you work and the worse it become. And so it's really frustrating. And
Yeah.
so I read a lot, I discuss in different meetups, and one of the first things that some more experienced software developers tell me was you have to work with automatic testing and especially unit testing. So it was really the base of my reflection, and about that I read Clean Code as well. It was one of the first book in terms of practices that I read, and indeed it make me realize how much I have to learn, because I believed, of course, because I was young, I believed that I was a very good software developer, and I understand that not at all, because I have so much to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So at first, I believed that these patterns were just not applicable, not in real company, because we have work to do. We don't have time for testing and
Mm-hmm.
all these fancy architectures.
Right.
So we need real stuff. We do real stuff. But after a while, I understand that it was just because my code was bad, that I wasn't able to put automatic testing in it. And when I understand that, I understand that this was probably true for many other topics as well, that I have lots of stuff to learn. And another topic I hear just a bit in this 2013, 2014 era was domain-driven design.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks really appealing because so the book is still
Oh, yes,
here.
I see
And I took this book, and Eric Evans was so good to 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 express exactly the pain I have met, and
it. Mm-hmm.
so I was thinking, okay, this guy he has something to say, and 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 he has many decades of experience that I can use here, and I have to use here. But at the same time, it looks really hard, really intimidating. And when I try to find people to explain me what it means, what it is, how to do that, it was just really, really hard. And it
Mm-hmm.
basically was the point where I decide that I need to learn. I need to find experts on these topics, and I need to find a way to learn. And indeed, that's typically when I start as a freelancer, I have only one objective. It was to work on projects where people at least want to learn or already do TDD, so test-driven
Mm-hmm.
development,
Yeah.
and also with people that at least want to learn about domain-driven design. It
Gotcha.
was my only, well, not my only, because you always have a financial issue and stuff like that, but
Sure. Sure.
it was really important in how I select
Technically, that's what you wanted to focus on. Yeah.
yeah, the project I want to work on.
So going back a little bit, when you started reading the domain-driven design book, and of course it's a bit daunting task, isn't it? Because the size of the book, first of all, it's pretty sizable. It's a big book, and then it is quite abstract. So when you start reading it, there are examples that real life examples with the uh, uh, especially during the beginning and middle of chapters, so, talking about the shipping examples and so on. So it's a really great book, but was it hard for you to, first of all, understand the material that was in it, so to really grasp what it was saying, but then after that, was it also difficult to translate that to other people?
Absolutely. And I
Mm.
think it's a really important point to say, yes, when you read it, you just don't understand it. And it's the same
Mhm.
thing for everybody. Don't
Yeah.
worry. You can grasp some part, but there are so many things in this book that you can't get it at once.
Yeah.
But you can just grab some parts, and it happens to me a lot in around the years to realize what he was actually talking about in my code. I was like,
Mm.
oh, okay, that was the point. That was exactly what he said here. But
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe several months and several moments to code it to understand that what he really means technically. And
Mm.
that's why this book is so great and so hard at the same time,
Mhm.
yes, it's abstract, and because you have practical stuff, but to be fair, the practical stuff is the less usable stuff today because it's
Yeah.
a bit updated,
Hmm.
outdated. Sorry, it's a bit outdated. You can't really, if you really want to be up to date, you don't really want to use the patterns, or at least not all the patterns described in this book,
Hmm.
but not the tactical patterns. But the other patterns are really make sense, and they are still true. And it's more about how you organize your project, how you organize your team, how you organize your company.
Right.
And to grab this, you need to have a bit of experience as a software developer.
Sure, makes sense. So the technical part of it, of course, was difficult, right? And you did gain some experience, and then you did have those aha moments, and things start to click. Um, Now, in terms of the project organization part of it, how you want to architecturally design things and basically have a blueprint of this project that you're about to start. Was that part easier to grasp and then to teach to others or to transfer that knowledge to others? Or did you also have difficulty with that part
Yeah,
as well?
no, to be fair, it's big. The the tactical patterns are easier to explain because
Mhm.
it's really physical. I mean, you can use code to show it.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's the tactical pattern. But the strategic patterns, they are about organization and how you think the project and how it impacts your company. And this is always hard to explain quickly because
Mhm.
when you talk to developers, they need to see code. So they ask you, okay, show me a DDD project. And,
Right.
and I did the same thing, of course. I did the
Yeah.
same thing when I started. I'm a developer. I want to do DDD. So just show me DDD, a DDD project,
Mhm.
and then I will do the same thing, and I will be a DDD professional. But
Mhm.
of course, it doesn't work like that because domain-driven design is about so many things. Yes, it's about code, but it's mainly about how the code will impact your company and the organization and the team. And you have to think the whole thing at the same time to understand it. And so, what makes me really improve about it and how I explain it to other people is through teaching, through training. So we build always with Florent and Clément. We build a training, a 2 day training about domain-driven design, and another 2 days training about CQRS and event sourcing. So we will talk about that also, of course. But just to say a word about it right now, why we arrived in this world of CQRS and event sourcing, it was through domain-driven design, and it was because at around 2017, 2019,
Mhm.
it was the it was the point. It was one of the architectures that DDD professional likes the most because it's one of the most robust way to build a project uh, and to be DDD compliant because you will have this opportunity to do something that makes sense for the project. So we build this training and we teach to people with these 4 days in total training, and it works well because for the same reasons that the Eric's books works with me. It's
Mhm.
because it's not easy to explain DDD quickly, but it's really easy to show where the pain are
Right.
and to tell people, I know why you have pain here, and I
Mhm.
could help you if you let me the time to explain to you where it
Mhm.
comes from. And when you take
Right.
this time, why because you can say, okay, I know the problems that you have. You feel like you have problem with the product, And actually, it's not a product problem, it's a company problem. It's because your company is not well organized, and it's because you try to do some things that should not have happened with the product. And that's the base of lots of your problems. And when they realize that,
Mhm.
when it click, they exactly like me at the same period, they still don't understand DDD, but they at least understand how powerful it could be, and so they want to learn more and they want to find a practical way to improve the product.
Makes sense. So, of course, without giving me any of your trade secrets, can you walk me through that process a little bit more? Because when you mentioned that you talk to, let's say, a company and they have these difficulties and you do these trainings for them, is it usually the case that they come to you, or is it more of you find these, let's say, projects or maybe developers at some meetup or what have you, and they kind of talk about their problems, and you're like, aha, this is something that I can help you with? Or is it sort of both ways?
Well, I don't know if it's still the case, but a few years ago, there weren't lots of DDD experts actually. So yes, people come to us because we do conferences, trainings. We were also on what was Twitter once,
Yeah.
and so we were kind of visible, and people, and we talked about that. And so yeah, most companies just come to us uh, because they feel so. It was often why it was interesting, because it was they often come to us because they would like to implement CQRS.
Mhm.
And that's a really interesting discussion I had with people in Action HQ as well, because you have the same problem of people that want to do CQRS, but they don't. When you try to understand, they don't really know why.
Yeah.
Often it looks like it's just because it looks cool, but
Mhm.
yeah, sure, it's cool, but why do you need it? How will it improve your product?
Mhm.
And that's actually the first training that we built was a CQRS one, but because people ask this to us, but as we expect, most of the
Mhm.
people that arrived in this training were not ready for this training, because if you
Mhm.
don't have the domain-driven design background to talk about CQRS,
Right.
you will most likely shoot yourself in the foot, and
Yeah, because it's hard to
you
understand it. Yeah.
yeah, you will just build an over-engineered solution, overcomplicated.
Hmm.
Nobody will understand it. Nobody will be able to maintain it, and it will be harder for people to understand the code, what it does. So it's a real problem. It costs a lot.
Hmm.
So that's why we built the other training after that, and often we were able to convince people, even people who insist to start with the CQRS one. At the end of the CQRS one, they understand why they actually need this DDD background, and we
Hmm.
can actually talk about it right now. While
Yeah, definitely.
both of these concepts are so tightly chained together, it's because CQRS and event sourcing are just tactical patterns that you
Hmm.
can use if it makes sense for your core domains, for what we call the core domain in domain-driven design, which is basically the really reason why your company earn money.
Yeah.
Uh, and so most of the time, but not often, indeed, with this kind of patterns, you will be able to build a more reliable product, but it's also harder to build it because you
Hmm.
need expert people on these patterns, and you need to understand exactly why and how you do it.
Yeah. I think there's more time that needs to be spent ahead of time designing, discussing, really understanding what it is that you're trying to get out of this application or this system.
And when you understand these strategic patterns of domain-driven design, you also understand that you don't need and you don't want the whole product to be in CQRS.
Yeah.
It's most likely not a good idea because most often you just have a core domain who deserves that, who deserves this complexity because it deserves the reliability that will
Mhm.
come with that architecture. But some other parts that are not your core business, you you can sometimes you can just choose another software to do that directly, or most often as well Excel will just do the job for a long time
Right.
before you need to go to something harder. And even when you go to something different, when you want to code something, you can just code the CRUD part and it will
Hmm.
be absolutely perfect for what you need to do because by essence this part of your domain is just a CRUD part, and it's okay. It's not a problem.
I'm so glad you're touching on this because a lot of times I know people who will first come into learning about these patterns and these uh, strategical decision making part of designing a system, they always worry about, oh, so this complexity, do I have to carry it through everything I do within my systems or applications? And I'm so glad you mentioned this because if the core domain is designed that way, you make it reliable, you make it resilient. But then the rest of the parts, if you're in microservices, for instance, you don't need to do that. Sometimes you, as you mentioned, you can use the, off the shelf kind of product, or you can use CRUD based applications. So it makes it easier and I think more digestible. We talked a little bit about you and I about how to introduce these patterns a while ago when we spoke, to make it more bite-sized and more digestible for people, especially who are new to these items. So that's really really great to mention and talk about, and I think it kind of um, makes people a little bit more comfortable in a sense to tackle this because they know that it doesn't have to be everywhere. You don't have to introduce this complexity everywhere. Just where it really is needed to do, and that's a really good point
Exactly.
to mention.
And you
Yeah.
just need to know why you do it, and
Yeah, that why
because
is very important. Absolutely.
if there's a good why, then you can do it. But otherwise, it's probably not a good idea. But
Hmm.
indeed, when you know why and how to do it, it's really, really powerful. And something we tackle with our company right now, because it's a startup, as you can guess, is that yeah, we of course care about DDD even when we started, and I like to repeat to people that if you care about DDD, you will probably have a lot of CRUD in your product, especially when you start.
Hmm.
Because when you start, you don't really understand what your customer wants, what your customer need. So you don't need to be perfect, but you need to be fast.
Yeah.
So you just want to iterate, to do something in a week, put it, okay, it's not perfect, doesn't work well, but it's enough to get feedback. And feedback is the key. And when you've got this feedback, you can iterate and improve it. And then when you understand that there is something, in the startup world, it's often when you're able to get your first customer, so paying customer, of course,
Right.
and when you're able also to convince people that there is a business. So
Mm.
not always, but it could be that you will be able to convince some investors in your company.
Yeah,
When you're
absolutely.
able to do that, then okay, now it makes sense to create something much more reliable. And so to be very clear with Super Endep, our company, our first MVP was basically a Google Sheet in an
Hmm.
HTML page,
Okay.
and so there was a bit of fancy stuff around that, but that was basically that.
Yeah.
Because with this, we were able to get the data from our customer. We were able to show them a few information interesting for the administrative stuff, and we do as if fake it until we make it. We do as if everything behind that was automatic. Like, we can do your taxes declaration automatically. Of course, we
Hmm.
did that with our hands, but the customer doesn't care. He put the
Didn't know that
data
and
in the
doesn't need
in
to
the
know. Yeah,
software.
right. Right.
Exactly. Put the data in the software, and he was happy because everything seems to be automatic and correct.
Mhm.
So of course, after that, when we understand, when we focus on auto entrepreneur and we understand the value that we can bring them, of course, after that, we build something automatic. And of
Mhm.
course, it wasn't an Excel sheet. It was much more complicated than that.
Right.
But even right now, because we have different parts in our business, the core business is indeed in CQRS and event sourcing.
Hmm.
But we have also an off-the-shelf software to manage invoice, because managing invoice for our customer was not our main business. So it was an open source software that we just brand to our customer. And that we connect with our products, but we didn't use it, we didn't code it,
Hmm.
and we are happy to contribute to this project, but we didn't code it
Yeah.
from the start, and this part is mainly cloud, because we
Hmm.
didn't make it, and actually we didn't really care how it's done, because it works well.
Hmm.
For our main products, everything is event source, and we use CQRS, and it's really interesting for us to do that because, of course, in taxes, you need to be really precise and
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
be able to know exactly what happens in what orders when, is absolutely fantastic for us. And
Yeah.
why people like very much what we do is that basically we are connected in real time to the administration, and we basically analyze every night what happens from the administrative side. So we are basically a log of every administrative events, important events in your company, and of course we can do automation about taxes and stuff like that. But the good thing is that we have these events basically. Business events from the administration, and we are able to react to these events. And it's really interesting for us to log that and to understand exactly what happens, because most often what they do is not logical at all. So you
Yeah.
are really happy to have these logs to understand that, okay, they deactivated the account and they put it again, and they change the address, and so you can just see exactly what they do, and it's so much easier to work with them after that.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned a few really important things. Thank you so much for your transparency about how you started your project and your company to begin with, because I think that's something that a lot of startups have a hard time at the beginning, right? Because you're trying to be perfect from the get go, and you don't have to be. And that's really important that you mentioned that. So really appreciate that. And it's really fascinating to follow this journey of yours and how you came to be. And the fake it till you make it part is really, we laugh about it, but it's really important because again, you can't be doing everything the absolute right way from the get-go, because you need to get this company going, right? You need to get started, you need to make money, you need to get investors. So there's that pressure on a lot of startups to get the project started and bring in some revenue. So that's really important. And I really also like that you focus on the startups and you focus on these patterns, but you are very strategic about it. Do you need it? Do you really need it? If you absolutely need it, then you can implement these patterns. If you don't need it, then don't bother with it, right? Do what works for you on case by case basis, which I think is also really important, because a lot of times as developers we see things that are cool and we want to be using the latest and the greatest technologies out there and patterns, and we want to be efficient and resilient and so on, but then we can also overwhelm ourselves really quickly. So it really is important to uh, take a step back and look at it in a bit more logically and practically, right?
Yeah, Actually, so the good thing is that when you become an older developer, you start to be wiser about that, and you're not that much interesting with fancy
Yeah.
stuff. You just wait and see and learn, of course, but you basically make differences between what will be useful anytime and what may be useful but just for technical purpose right now. But I had the chance, I squeezed this part in my career, but in the first company I work with, as a not as a freelancer, but when I was a salary, I I have to work in Silverlight, so maybe there are some old people listening to this podcast, and they know that. So Silverlight was one of Flash concurrents
Mhm.
a while ago. So when Flash was cool, so it was also a few, yeah, more than a decade ago. But anyway, so, but as a young developer, I was so convinced that it was the future. I was like, oh, Silverlight is so cool. And actually, it was very cool because we build image processing software directly in the navigator. It was really directly in the browser. It was really, really cool. We did really cool stuff with that. And then it just failed and when I see that, I understand that, okay, actually, the techniques, the language, it's not really important. What is important is the patterns. And when I start to learn that, it helps me to be a much better developer in every mission I get after that, because as soon as I arrived on a mission, I was able to understand where the complexity was and why it was complex. And very often, I understand that the complexity, most people believed it was a technical complexity. For example, people were trying to build some synchronization between two databases. So as you could expect, of course, it was something really, really complex to do because they didn't have a master and slave. They just want the same data at the same time in both databases. And when you understand from a domain focus why they try to do that, you understand that the problem is not what they're trying to do, but the organization and the fact that they ask the technical part to do this synchronization that just doesn't make sense. And so when you understand that, you can be really efficient in your job and you'll be really, really impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you're mentioning these points because, of course, they're important, but also a lot of times they are overlooked because, as you mentioned, often we look at the technical aspect of things as opposed to looking at what kind of problems we're really trying to solve in the company or in a software application or what have you. So, identifying those problems and organizing in a way that the application or the systems can be much more efficient. That I think is the core of what a lot of times we want to focus on, but we sort of overlook it. We look into languages or stacks or platforms that we can use to quote unquote be more efficient and resilient, as opposed to really looking at what kind of values we're trying to put into this project, or how does the business need to make money, right? That's basically the core of a lot of the problems we have. So really fascinating topics, and of course we can talk about these, any which one of them, for hours at a time, but I'm really happy that we could sort of squeeze a lot of them in this 30-40 minute conversation, and share that with everybody, because these are the problems that a lot of people have and face, and sometimes feel a little bit stuck in. So I'm really glad that you took the time to explain them. So really, thank you. Are there any other points that you want to share towards the end that you feel like might be important or beneficial to the listeners?
Well, yeah, I think to come back to Axon IQ, actually, it was fun because when I start to learn about CQRS and event sourcing, I was also thinking about a framework to help people to do that. And finally, we didn't even try because exactly because some of the problem you meet now, it was because we believed that most of the time the good way to implement CQRS is to start it from scratch. I mean, just to understand it, how
Yeah.
it works and how it could work. And then when you understand really the basics, the different patterns, the pub sub and so on, then it really makes sense to use a framework if it could make you more productive. And that's where Axon AQ can be awesome to implement, and that's where they could help you. But yeah, again, you really need to learn after that. You need to try to do without a framework. And actually, that's true for every framework
Right. Yeah.
in the software industry.
Yeah, of course.
Try to build something without this, and when you understand how it works, then it makes sense to use the framework to be more productive, because you will understand what the framework is doing and
Yeah,
why
sure.
it's doing this.
So everything, it doesn't seem like a magic, right? So you have that understanding of what's
Exactly.
happening. Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning the Axon framework. I'm sure the team will be really happy to hear that as well. But yeah, absolutely, it's important. I actually did talk to one of our engineers a while back about, to use a framework or not to use the framework, and I think that what you mentioned is really valuable because yes, of course, the framework can help you with in a lot of challenges that you may have, but it is also important to understand those challenges without using a framework so that you can kind of assess on your own to see if it's something that you really need. Do you want to build everything from scratch and do all the pipe work, so to speak, or do you want to use the framework? And of course, as you mentioned, using the framework is really valuable, but you do have to have that background understanding of what it is that you're trying to get out of this framework before you start using this. So I really appreciate that notion as well. So thank you so much for your time, Emily, and I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope to come back and talk more at a different time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, Sarah.
I hope you liked my talk with Emilien. Please join me next time as I speak with other wonderful guests about fascinating topics. Until then, have a great time and happy coding.